you have been a county commissioner for actually quite a long time. And
just 3 years.
Right. So in my book, that's actually,
okay.
Things change so quickly nowadays.
That's true.
And I personally know a bit about the US political system, but I don't know very much, and I think a lot of people don't know very much how the interface works between the federal government, the regional government, the local government. And if you could enlighten us there a little bit, because our friend said that you were really engaged with that situation towards Washington as well. And so it'd be really interesting if you could give us some structural basis.
Sure. So county governments are actually a branch of state governments in the U.S. So we are very much controlled by the state. Our funding is very much controlled by the state, and our programs are essentially, unless we can raise additional revenue, our programs are pretty much handed down by the state. There are programs that we are required to do, and then anything on top of that we have to create our own funding for. So it's much more so than municipal government, towns and cities in the U.S. Counties are directly under the state to implement sort of state regulations. So county governments basically do public health and land use, zoning regulations, and roads and bridges, and public safety. So in Colorado, in the U.S., I think most states, it's the sheriff's office. So it's the public safety entity for the unincorporated, so outside of the towns and cities. Towns and cities have their own police forces. So we operate pretty independently from, or I should say, towns and cities operate pretty independently from county and state government. There are some, like Denver, the capital of Colorado, is a county city. It's so large it actually acts as a county city, but they function more like a city. They have a mayor, and they function more like a city government and a little less like a county government, but they're required to have all the county regulations in place as well as the city regulations. But counties are very much attached to state government, state statutes, state legislation, and then states are very dependent on federal government programs. So in effect, many of our human services, health and human service programs are initially funded through the federal government, which provides funding to the states, and then the states pass it through to the counties.
So if I understand that correctly, what happens on a federal level does influence you. It goes through the county level and then kind of ends up at your doorstep. Is that correct? Now, you mentioned something that I find very interesting. So what the county commission and subsequently is dealing with is a lot of infrastructure, basic infrastructure topics, matters. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So it's basically it's the roads you drive on and the bridges you cross over when you are in the unincorporated, so outside of the towns and city boundaries. So it's a lot of the rural infrastructure. It's sort of how you connect to the state highway system.
That's how the valley floor comes in, because it's outside the city, if I understand.
It was outside the city.
We'll come to that. I just got to... I'm beginning to understand. Thank you. So how are we doing? I mean, how are you doing? We hear quite nightmarish things about the infrastructure in the US, and I honestly have to admit, It varies from state to state, but driving here with my colleague from Atlanta was quite exciting at times due to an infrastructure that does not seem to be necessarily of a first world country, if I may say so, without being rude.
I take no offense.
Okay, but tell me, I mean, Colorado, of course, the states are very different. That is something one notices traveling through the US. How are things here with the basic infrastructure in your responsibility area?
Well, it's extremely challenging in Colorado because Colorado has the strictest financial regulatory system. It's called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and it was enacted. It's a constitutional amendment to the state constitution that was enacted in the mid '80s or early '90s, and it basically it's highly complex. And it has all sorts of potentially unintended consequences, unintended consequences. Although the guy Doug Bruce who put it in place probably intended for it to be really complex to basically shut down governments because he doesn't believe in governments. So it requires any tax increase to go before the voters. So normally in other states around the country, cities and states will come up with their budgets and then they will tax accordingly. And if they're coming up with a budget that is completely unreasonable, then they probably get voted out of office. If they're coming up with a budget that has some kind of increase when times are good or ratchets down when times are bad, then, maybe those people stay in office. That's sort of responsible governing. In Colorado, when times are really good, the spending has to stay the same. And when times are really bad, the spending has to ratchet down because there's less revenue, but there's no savings that was created when times were good.
So public sector, not easy.
No, it's extremely difficult in Colorado. And the majority of Coloradans prefer that we go back to the ballot every time there is a new tax, and that was one of the intentions of Tabor. However, right now we're in a situation where we've had a really good economy. Colorado has one of the best economies for businesses in the whole U.S. It's an excellent economy, but we haven't been able to create any savings from that. And we have one of the lowest per pupil spending education systems in the country. So we've got this, very sophisticated population with a lot of people coming in because it's so beautiful in Colorado and the mountains are here and we've got wonderful weather and we've got ski areas and hiking trails and biking trails. And we've got one of the lowest funded education systems in the country. We're like ranking down in the bottom quarter of the country. And that's because of Tabor. The government cannot afford to spend increasing amounts of money on transportation as we've got growing populations, growing infrastructure challenges, etc. And then same with our transportation systems. With more and more people coming into Colorado, there's more and more people using the roads. There's more and more impact on the roads. The changing climate is a significant impact on our roads and bridges. The engineers are having to adapt technology because of the freeze-thaw cycles, and the extreme weather patterns are really impacting our surface areas, roads and bridges and connections, and potholes is basically one of the symptoms of that. And yet we don't have enough money to spend on that basic infrastructure. And just at the ballot this month, so a week ago, there was an opportunity for Coloradans to vote yes on what was called Proposition CC. And it would have allowed the state, when times were good, it would have allowed the state to keep the additional revenue as opposed to giving it back to its taxpayers, and build up a savings account or put it into schools. It was specifically for kindergarten through 12th grade, which is, what's that?
12th grade 4 and 6
the
is 10.
Formative years. No, what's it called?
It's 18. Is
12th grade.
Yeah, 12th grade is in high school, no?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's high school.
Yeah,
High school.
yeah, before you move on.
Yeah. So a third of it was going to go into basically elementary and high school. And then a third of it was going to go into higher education, so state colleges, universities. And then a third of it was going to go into transportation. And it would have only been like $124 million a year in a really good year, which isn't every year. So the state would have had a little bit more to spend on those education and transportation, which continue to rise to the top in terms of importance and things we value. And Colorado voters turned it down.
Okay, we'll let that stand here. That was interesting. So you said this would have been kind of an amendment to the amendment of the state constitution. I kind of didn't have that in my mind, that the states have their own constitution, which has to be in accordance with the federal constitution.
Yes. Right.
Okay, but they have certain leeway.
Right.
All right, interesting.
It has to comply with, everybody has to comply with our federal, the U.S. Constitution, right. But states have their own that match in different ways. Which
then makes them very different, depending right. on how the population votes. Okay, that's where we're at. From that vote, could we say that it's more Republican? I mean, I always hear that Coloradans want less government, or are they just incredibly independent and want to mend their own potholes? Or it's hard for me to...
Right, well, it's hard for a lot
to
of
understand,
us to
you know,
understand.
That these things are important, I mean, for everybody.
It's difficult to... I mean, the split in Colorado, there is a growing divide between sort of the wealthier, more stable Front Range communities, so the higher population communities in and around the Denver area, and then the mountain towns, the resort towns that have a really stable economy because they have that resort economy with all sorts of recreational opportunities. They're beautiful places where people want to live, so they're pretty stable economies. And then we have our rural communities that are more spread out, less populated. There are maybe less infrastructure needs, and that's where people like less government.
Because they don't feel the need.
Right.
Okay. So
they don't feel the need, and yet, or they don't associate government with doing good things for them. And they have, you know, I think a lot of rural Colorado has sort of fallen into this, has retained a very independent attitude of we can do all this on our own, and yet it's not getting done. Their schools are falling apart. They're going to 4-day school weeks. Their economies are crumbling. In rural Colorado, a lot of communities were very dependent on resource extraction. So whether it be coal mining, electric production from coal, uranium mining in the past, oil and gas, all of those are very fluctuating economies. And so it creates a boom-bust cycle for those rural economies. And when they're doing really well, they get the infrastructure they need, they build their schools, people bring their families there because there are jobs, and then the economy changes, those things aren't as in demand, and people leave, their schools don't have the funding they need, their roads are falling apart and they don't get funded either. But those communities really retain their sort of pioneer independent spirit, which I respect hugely. And, you know, I think it was what Colorado was founded on. It was what the West was founded on. And if we could find a way to retain that sort of pioneering spirit with a recognition that there is an appropriate role for government, then I think Colorado would be much more sustainable in the future. Right now, we're sort of teetering on this edge of our rural communities falling apart, and the haves having more and more, because, you know, like in Telluride, our economy is very stable and it's doing really well, and we have enough resources, and people vote for tax increases for important things like affordable housing and schools, and our road systems and behavioral health and early childhood education. We continue to vote for tax increases for those things. And so governments are able to provide those services. But in the rural communities, their governments aren't really able to provide those services. So then they're more and more dependent on the state government. Right. And then they vote against the state government and they tie the hands of the state government even further. So it's we've got to figure out a way to really support our rural communities while the economy of Colorado continues to thrive.
And with all the challenges that are coming towards it, I mean, none of that is totally alien to the rest of the world. I mean, as you know,
no.
So it's interesting to hear it from here. Before we get on to these challenges and the things that are very important to you, from what I understand, what is your job? so as a person, as a commissioner, what do you do?
So, well, that's a good question, and a lot of people don't really understand it. It is a full-time job, depending on which county you're in. If you've got a really small population, you can do it as a part-time job. We're at the lower end of the higher populations and at the upper end of the lower populations, so it's considered a full-time job. We basically... we manage the county infrastructure. So we do that through the budget. We decide on the budget and we work with our manager. We have a county manager who is the sort of day-to-day manager of our organizational structure. And we manage the budget and then we decide on land use issues. In addition to that, my role is that I've taken on being the liaison with the state and the federal government.
Okay, that's
so I spend a lot of time in Denver working on legislation that is going to support projects that we need. So support additional funding or simply play defense and make sure the state isn't creating all these wonderful programs that aren't funded, that then we have to implement without the appropriate funding. And then just being a watchdog for the county, because almost everything that the state does affects the counties. And you can either sort of sit back and hope that the state will do the right thing, or you can be actively involved. And I decided to jump in and be really actively involved so that I could really understand it, to participate knowledgeably in the process. And also because I just really enjoy debating policy and discussing policy. And we've got a couple big issues here. One is affordable housing, and the other is the cost of health insurance and access to health services.
Again, something that is not only the case here, that is something across the US. I mean, back home, these issues exist as well. So how is the relationship with Washington? Let's look at it regardless of administration that is currently in place. How is it? Is it that far away, or is it like, oh, Colorado, they're so rich anyway, or how do you deal with them? How do you deal with Washington?
It really depends on your representative. So we have 2 representatives in this area. Well, 3. That's right. There's 3. One of them, we have 2 senators. Every state has 2 senators. And then depending on the population size of each state, you have a certain number of representatives for your population size. I don't actually remember how many representatives we have, but we have one representative that represents all of Southwest Colorado. So he actually has one of the largest districts in the country land-wise, because it's a relatively spread out population. San Miguel County is a rural county, although we have Telluride, which is sort of a more urban feel.
It's its own case.
But it's its own little bubble. But once you get outside of Telluride, we're a very rural economy and feel. So it really depends on, if the people in Washington are truly representational. And right now we have we have a Republican and a Democrat representing us at the Senate. The Democrat who's also running for president right now. His name's Michael Bennet. Is extremely representational, and he's worked at the school board level, at the state government level, in private business, and now he's been in the Senate for 8 years, I guess it is. It's probably a little more than that. And I find him extremely approachable. His staff works really hard. He's done a lot of good things for us. And I think he's a very effective representative of the entire state of Colorado.
So you wouldn't mind if he became president, however unlikely
I think it would be fancy.
Seems.
Yeah, I think it would be fancy. He would make a fantastic president.
Is he still in the debates?
He's still in it. Yeah. He's not necessarily in the debates.
But in the big chunk.
He's entering himself in the primaries, and he's been spending a lot of time in Iowa. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, any chance?
Anything could change. Sure, anything could happen. I mean, this is, anything could happen this day and age. You never know what's going to happen. And then we have another senator who's up for re-election, who basically is doing everything that Trump tells him to do these days. He's decided to get under Trump's wing and just simply govern like that. And I would say the majority of Colorado right now is pretty upset with the way he is governing, and that is reflected in his polling numbers. Then we have the representative who represents all of Southwest Colorado. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think, there's more and more of a partisan divide, I think everywhere. And then there's also this economic divide. There's this growing inequality across the world right now, globally.
Yeah, speak a little bit to that, because that is what we find anywhere we go and everywhere. And that makes people so uncomfortable that they do all kinds of really apparently pretty crazy things against their own interests, in my humble opinion. But but how does that play out as far as you're experiencing it here around?
Yeah, I think it creates a lot of anger. It creates a lot of uncertainty. It creates a lot of friction and division within populations, even sometimes within like-minded people or like-minded communities. There's this underlying friction and anxiety that is just increasing more and more from the top down. I think it's coming from our leadership.
Ways to mend it.
Yeah. So here's what I've been thinking about lately. For the last several decades, there's been this push by Republicans for more local government. Give us more control. We want more control of our funding. We want more control of our programs. You just give us the money and back off. Don't tell us what to do, they've said to state and federal governments. That's been a very much Republican sensibility for many, many years. That is sort of shifting, I am sensing, because there's this lack of leadership right now at the federal level, and the federal government is pulling all sorts of programs. So now in the communities that strongly value the environment and, basic things like clean air and clean water, they're seeing less and less support and less of a regulatory structure for preserving those things and really preserving their communities from the federal government. So now a lot of those more progressive communities are saying, just give us the money, give us the flexibility, and we'll manage these programs, because we need to preserve our environment. We want to protect our clean air. We want to protect our clean water. We need to regulate these extractive industries to act appropriately and in an environmentally sensitive way, and in a way that respects public safety. And we feel that we can do that better ourselves. So traditionally, then I'm just generally speaking, the Democrats have been fighting against this concept of local control, saying, no, we need broader regulations because we need to protect the clean air and clean water of all of our communities. And now that's shifting to we can do that better at a local level. And so I yes, I think we can do that. Many of our communities can do that better at a local level, if we, value with the environmental values and sort of the looking at the long term sustainability of our communities. I think there's the potential to do that at a local level, but I think there's also the potential to do a lot of harm with short-sighted government, and then at the same time, are we willing to sit by and watch our neighbors who may be more willing to embrace resource extraction, trash their environments, and
there are no real borders, so it's trashing all over the place.
It's trashing watersheds that are all connected. It's trashing our airshed that's all connected. And then a lot of those communities then become very dependent on their wealthier neighbors because they've basically trashed their long-term economic opportunities.
And if their water is undrinkable, they got to get it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So nothing is separated.
Or people move, and there's not enough people to sustain the population, and they can't, fix their roads, and they can't provide basic services, whether they be, health or human safety or whatever it is. So, is it dog eat dog? Or are we going to, get back to recognizing the sense of a more, of a larger community of, everything from the local scale to the watershed scale to the United States being a larger community and giving people those basic opportunities to rise up and, live healthy and productive lives.
And to think intergenerationally, because there's somebody coming. Yeah, our kids.
I think we need to do that as larger communities. But that concept has become a dirty word in many ways because of our leadership right now, which is not good for us long term.
We let it stand there. We'll, from the outside, watch it and wish you all the best. But you have, in your life, the way I could research it, done a lot of interesting things. One of the things that people were talking about, that when you came to Telluride early on, I'm not sure now, you founded or edited or were responsible for a magazine that people seem to be missing. The people I spoke to said it was a cool magazine. So you have some media, how do you say, baggage or some media experience.
Baggage, that's good.
How does that work regionally? I mean, everyone I talk to, because we are into media, we love it. We think it's part of the solution. How is it going here, and what are your thoughts on the role of media in the political process? Maybe really in the more local sense.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I came up with the idea for the magazine when I was filming.
Sorry, what kind of magazine was it?
It was an outdoor adventure magazine. It was called Mountain Freak, and it was my alternative version of Outside Magazine. I felt like Outside Magazine was kind of exploitive, or exploited the outdoor adventure industry, and so I wanted to make a more soulful version of sort of outdoor adventure lifestyle. But I was filming a ski and snowboard movie up in British Columbia one winter, and came across a little zine up there called Ski Freak Radical, and absolutely fell in love with it. It was kind of this little cartoony zine, and it talked about the skiing lifestyle and the people who were just totally dedicated to skiing and outdoor lifestyle. And I fell in love with it, and I asked them if I could do a sister version down in Colorado, and they said, "We don't want a sister, you just do your own version." And so I came back and I sort of planted the idea with some friends and brought some really talented people together. And then we were discovered, and we got funding and backing for about 7 years. And we produced a really high quality magazine, and ended up launching quite a few careers in the outdoor industry. But we just didn't have enough advertising. The advertisers just didn't really get the concept of, organic gardening and, marijuana advocacy back before it was legal, and, wandering through deserts in Mexico, searching for the ultimate agave plant that would give you, that sort of beyond
Damn, you're going to start
alcoholic
it again.
high. It was fantastic because it attracted such an amazing variety of creative artists and writers, and my job was just to simply facilitate that and put them all together and give them a platform, and I was thrilled to do it and met a lot of wonderful people in the process. So I think that, and this was before we sort of ended, we were approached to convert the content online. So we were approached to do provide web-based content for a little, very unknown company at the time called Travelocity.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted us to create their content. So wherever they were trying to highlight their trips, we would then come up with this really creative sort of mountain freak style content. And I just did not understand that concept at all. I mean, the whole web was new. I didn't think people were going to use it. I was very much into print. I liked the real high quality. I didn't want people staring at their computer screens. So I was like, no, that's not going to work. So we turned them down. And then we ended up folding. And then a couple times I have gone back into the world of filmmaking. So I think now it can be one of the most effective with the technology we have. I travel to shows in other parts of the country with the Mountain Film Festival, which is a local festival of documentary films. It started as adventure films, outdoor adventure, and then added environmental, and then added sort of social and cultural films. And there are so many good filmmakers out there these days that are really allowing people to effectively tell their stories, or they're capturing those who are very good storytellers. And I think it's an art and it's an oral tradition that
We just gotta ignore it now. Yeah, we gotta ignore it.
Okay.
Yes. Then we're gonna pull through.
Storytelling is an art and an oral tradition that absolutely needs to be preserved, and I think we probably even need a stronger emphasis. And one of the projects I've been working on, sort of floating in and out of recently, is in my work. I was not a scientist. Unfortunately, I wasn't inspired in high school by science. I think I had science teachers who weren't really that inspiring or engaging for me the way I thought. So I just thought science was this boring thing that I'd never be engaged in. Now I'm absolutely fascinated with science, and I can't get enough of it. So I surround myself by as many really good scientists as possible. And there are a few who are very good storytellers as well. So we've been working on a series of films or content that we'll create for schools around forest health. And the science we are learning from our forests that are changing, they're evolving, how they are connected to their ecosystems, how their ecosystems are dependent on them. And we're following these scientists who are very good storytellers through the woods as they conduct their research, and sort of capturing their hands-on research while also hearing from them what they are learning by doing that research. And we hope to turn that into content that we can take to, inner city schools to really talk about place-based learning and learning from your environment, and how the science that we gather can really inform, our decisions of the future.
Now, two things you've mentioned, and that was not on my list, but that's really important. So, how can we get a hold of the narrative that is constructed to misinform people, consciously constructed and very well constructed to do that? And that's related, of course. There is not only a science fatigue, but there is a certain science animosity. And that is something that has really spread crazily. Only the last, I would say, 10 years, maybe even 5 years, it's become really, really sensitive, especially in regards to ecological issues or the biggest issues, climate change. So how do you feel as a person, as a media maker, that one can tackle that?
I think first of all, it's really important to inspire scientists of the future. Because we need more people out asking really simple, basic questions and then really important questions to help inform our future decisions. And then also, science can just inform so much more than understanding the world around you from a scientific perspective can just make you a more productive community member as well. And more engaged and more willing to sort of protect your environment for the future. So I think even though there is, yes, there are people out there who are creating fake news and false science and trying to manipulate communities and populations and individuals through their, through sort of dark ways, false stories. I don't think we should give up because it's still a really strong medium, and the more we can instill this fact finding and truth finding in people, the more we can filter out the false news, I think. And in terms of like the bigger picture, should there be more censorship, etc.? I don't like the idea of censorship. I don't like the idea of manipulating populations. I think we just need to, from the ground up, really build stronger, more informed populations, and then we will just weed out. There's always going to be people who want to tell false stories and create sort of there's always going to be the dark side.
But that's the funny thing, because the dark side calls you the dark side, or us. Right. I mean, especially in the US, something exists which we really don't have in Europe. It's like all this homeschooling thing. And we met at Politicon several people who said, no, actually the government should stay completely out of education. We know. And there was other people who teach their kids that the world is 6,000 years old. Now that is not a small phenomenon in the US and in several other places that are much less intellectually advanced neither. So I'm really wondering, you said we can't give up, but how do we reach people who are indoctrinated with a narrative from the earliest age on, and within this democratic system have the same vote? And it's not a few, otherwise we wouldn't have the administrations in some places that we have. Right. I just ask you because it's on my mind. I
think it should be on all of our minds. I mean, I think we just have to create that spark. I mean, it's like having a teenager in the house, I guess, that maybe is, doing this on their screen and doesn't want to go outside. You just have to keep, putting all these different opportunities in front of them until you find one that just sparks their curiosity. And once you spark their curiosity, you enable them to follow, that path. And I'm an optimist, and I do believe that, generally with love, with health, with good food, people are ultimately have the power to be good. And I think I don't think we should give up or create more controls. I think we just need to continue, working on our education system. Yes, I mean, I totally agree. Our education system needs to be exploded and rebuilt, but that is extremely difficult with a population of our size. Difficult, if not impossible. It would create total chaos, and it would take a whole nother generation to rebuild our education system. So we need to continue doing it, from the local level up, and offering more experiential opportunities to see what sparks people. Just simply taking kids outside and wandering around, whether it may be, a little park in their neighborhood, or, some architecture in their neighborhood, or an empty lot in their neighborhood, and sparking their interest in what could be done with that empty lot, or what could be done to change the architecture to make it more welcoming, perhaps. Or, we are very fortunate to have the valley floor, so we can send kids out to the valley floor and looking on the ground and seeing what's there, and looking up and seeing what's there, seeing which trees are dying, which trees are living, what is the river doing, how is it all connected, and seeing if that sparks an interest in sort of truth finding. And then they take that into wherever, whether they take it into Wall Street, or they take it into a vocational skill, plumbing and electricians and carpentry, whatever it is, all of those important things that are needed. If they have an interest and a curiosity, and they continue to ask questions and want to make things better, want to improve things for their community, their families, their communities, and for the future, then we're going to slowly rebuild what is kind of a broken system right now.
And the rest is freedom. I mean, you always come up to that as a human being here, no?
Yeah.
Somebody believes it's 6,000 years old. What can you do? Maybe they find some dinosaur bones, and then we teach them carbon dating and whatever. Thank you. You said you're an optimist. And I hear that a lot here. And I'm really glad, because I'm often surrounded by less optimistic individuals. And sometimes people say, like, optimist, you're only an optimist because you don't have enough information. I don't think so. But we've talked about, and we keep on talking about it daily, all the time, and it's necessary, about ecology, about the environmental context in which we live. Now, two relatively simple questions to round this up. But there's a lot of choice of what could scare one. What worries you the most currently, looking at the immediate and midterm future? What is the one thing where you'd say, like, in my position as a human being and in my position professionally, that's what I address. That's I wake up with that every day.
It's are my kids going to be resilient enough for the massive changes that we're about to see? Have I set them up with enough basic skills and decision-making capacity to be able to adapt for the future? Because it's going to be more and more challenging for them to live.
You say resilience, that's something that's come up more and more. At the beginning of the climate environmental debate, it was like, how do we solve it? How do we stop it? Now everybody says resilience. So it seems people are saying the train is running, and we got to deal with it. What is part of that resilience? What does it take to be a resilient human being for your kids, for anyone? You think, what is it?
I think, resilience is the ability to bounce back. So it's the ability to be crafty. It's the ability to, first of all, I haven't given up on the climate. I think we are going to see a lot of changes. Absolutely. We've gone past the tipping point. We are going to see a lot of changes. That said, we need to do everything we can as local, state, and federal governments to combat climate change, to conserve, to cut back substantially on our use of fossil fuels, our use of water, and we need to move towards more sustainable forms of energy and of transportation systems, and building structures as well. So I'm not giving up on that, and I, as a government official, I'm doing everything I can to create our little pocket here as carbon neutral. So basically offset our footprint as much as possible, starting at our organizational level and then spreading out into our community to prove that it can be done. And maybe that can be done step by step at the local level. It's too late to wait for the federal government to do that. They can do a lot more, but we can't expect anything in the next year. But at the same time, I also want to prepare my family and especially my kids for a really challenging future. And I think that's going to mean things like, knowing how to keep your water clean, knowing how to keep your air clean, being very resourceful with limited resources, knowing where to live and being able to adapt in case they need to be more nomadic in the future, not being, completely attached to creature comforts. And then as simple as, knowing where to get your food. I mean, hunting and gathering. And then also knowing how to build community. Because I think in the future we are going to need we're going to be more and more dependent on our communities as we're sort of more cut off from global economies and global opportunities and stuff that we think we need right now. And it's going to have to get down to, what do you really need, not what you want anymore. What do you really need? And how can you, make the best decision to get there? And then who do you surround yourself with to empower, circle of safety, whatever it is? What kind of people do you surround yourself with to build a strong community and get those needs taken care of? So resilience is sort of knowing who you are and being able to make smart decisions, or when you make mistakes, being able to bounce back from that, learn from that, and make a better decision next time. And then also just being crafty with what you have in front of you. I mean, it's a really basic. I think they're going to be required to break it down to really basic needs in the future. Maybe it's not their generation, maybe it's the generation after them, but I think it's going to be their generation more than we've had. We've lived in this safety, security bubble for a pretty long time now, we globally, and that's deteriorating. I mean, we see it, and we're in this little bubble in Telluride where we're protected from it, but we see it. So I don't have my eyes closed. I'm an optimist, and yet I see the world crumbling around us, and I see that there's we're going in that direction, and so how do we make sure that we sort of protect ourselves as we go in that direction, while working our butts off to be more, conserving and becoming as carbon neutral as possible. It's not over till it's over.
No, till the fat lady sings. And if we all do our yoga, there ain't no fat lady, so it's never going to be over. No, thank you. We're going to let that stand there. Thanks, Hilary.
Yeah.
She was dancing,